What's going on, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video, and today we're going to be having a discussion about Mr. Bradley Beal himself. Now, there's been a lot of talk around Bradley Beal about his performance and him showing up and playing, and we're just going to be kind of talking about that. I'm going to be giving my insight, my opinion, and my view on the whole Bradley Beal situation. Just a quick disclaimer, this isn't a hate video at all. This is not me slandering Bradley Beal. This is just my thoughts, my opinions on his play as of recent and just his whole tenure with the Phoenix Suns. But yeah, I have no disrespect towards Beal. At the end of the day, this is just a sport, but these guys are expected to show up and play at the peak. You know, these guys are paid big bucks to come out here and play basketball. So I think it's fair that I give my opinion as a fan and then just as an analytics side. So just want to say no hate once again, and let's get into it. As we all know, the tenure with this big three with the Phoenix Suns has not gone as planned. Injuries, coaches, front office, and just the result on the court hasn't been what we expected it to be and what we wanted it to be. The Suns currently are fighting for a spot in the play-in, a very similar spot to what it was last season, except they were a better team overall. Somehow, this team has more talent, I feel, but it just hasn't meshed well. It hasn't meshed well together. I'm not putting blame on anyone here. I'm not slandering or discrediting anyone, because these guys they're some of the best players in the world. You know, less than 1% make it to the NBA, and I'm sure, I don't even know what the percentage is. It's very slim, but half of them don't even, or less than half, make it this far into their careers and play at such a high level for so many years. So yeah, it's kind of tough. I don't like making videos like this, but I feel like I voiced my opinion a lot on Twitter and Instagram. Like, not like it really matters or anything, but I just kind of want to give a more in-depth look, I guess, at my opinion and my side on Bradley Beal. Kind of just be going over the pros and cons of this whole tenure. I'm gonna start off with the pros first. Bradley Beal has as a third option hasn't been terrible when you look at the other third options in the league. Of course, you got Derek White, and the Thunder have, I don't know who they consider, Jalen Williams or Chet Holmgren as their third option. Either way, Bradley Beal hasn't been terrible as far as production wise when he does play on the court. Beal is averaging 17 points per game. He's also averaging 3.6 assists along with 3.4 rebounds. Shooting pretty much 49% from the field, almost 50%, which is, I think, the highest in Bradley Beal's career. But I think a lot of that it has to do with the amount of touches Beal gets and his usage rate not being as high. You know, he's not the number one scorer on the team. He's not the number one focus when it comes to getting the ball. And that's another thing too that we're going to get into later on in this video. And then Beal actually, in his past 2 years with the Phoenix Suns, has shot the highest from three in his whole NBA career, which I thought was kind of cool to see. But especially with the volume increase in threes too, I'm pretty sure this, I didn't look at the stats specific, but I'm pretty sure this is like the highest amount of threes Beal has probably shot in his career. That being the main focus in today's NBA. So I thought that was kind of cool to see. But yeah, this is actually the best he shot from three and from the field from his career. I guess we'll get into that now. Obviously, the amount of touches Beal has been getting hasn't been the same as his Washington days. But unlike those days, he didn't have Devin Booker in his prime, or Kevin Durant that is still at the end of his prime or in his prime. I don't know. KD's been consistent his whole career. He's just been a dog, so I don't really know when to consider his prime being over. But in terms, I guess, in age-wise, I don't know. I don't think he's out of his prime. But it's clear that things haven't worked out with Bradley Beal and the Phoenix Suns. I hate to be the guy that says, hey, the body language hasn't looked that good or engaging, because, for one, I'm not at all the games, but the two games I've went to this year, It's been a very clear, drastic difference in watching Bradley Beal. Like the first game I went to, I guess I didn't really look at it as much, or watched him, I should say. But the second game that I went to a couple weeks back, when the Suns played the Timberwolves and we lost by a lot, Beal didn't play, but I just kind of watched like how he interacted with the team and just how he was on the bench. He was very disconnected. And of course, there's a picture that I'm gonna throw up here of Beal. Just didn't look in it, man. And then I thought Beal was very engaged with the team. And maybe he probably still is. You know, I'm not in the locker room. You know, I'm not at the practices or anything, so I'm not gonna make a judgment on that, because I don't think that's really fair to judge a player on how well he's been engaged with the team, considering I'm not there. You know, none of us are there, so you can't really make a judgment off that. But just kind of based on what you hear and what you see, it seems like Brad's been checked out though for a minute. Ever since the trade conversations back when the Jimmy Butler thing was going on and the Suns were trying to get Butler and trying to get rid of Beal, you know, that's kind of when it kind of started happening, when you're noticing that difference on the court with Bradley Beal. I would say that's probably when I saw Beal check out. Last year I thought he was really good in terms of being engaged with the team. I mean, Brad doesn't seem out of it in terms of like media interviews with Dwayne Rankin and stuff when they're in there talking to him, so that's always a positive. But just the output, I feel like hasn't been what we expected, and a lot of that has to do with the amount of games Beal's played. You know, Brad in his past 2 years with the Phoenix Suns, I think he's played the least amount of games, or close to, in his career. I think this year it's his third least amount of games he's played in a season. I think 1 year he played like 40 games with the Wizards. That was one of his last years with the Wizards. Then last year in Phoenix, I don't remember what it was. If it was in the 40s, if it was like 48 or something. I'm not entirely sure when I looked, but right now it's at 50. And then obviously, you know, we still got a couple games left, which might move that up a little bit, but not like it's really gonna matter though, because the Suns are desperately fighting for a playing spot, and you know, just hasn't been good this year. And I think a lot of things to do with Bradley Beal not being as consistent on the court is probably the fact that he's been injured so much. You know, because one thing about Brad that I've noticed is he'll come back and he'll have like a good game or two, and then he'll be out for a couple weeks. And you know that just happens. Like if you're gonna be out for a while, it's gonna be hard to get back in rhythm and build consistency. And that's kind of been the thing the whole season. You know, he's came back, he's had a solid game, then probably had like an off game or two, just trying to get in that rhythm, trying to get into the flow with the team. Then once you kind of feel like, you know, this team kind of looks like they could do something, Bradley Beal gets injured, or you know. I know, so it sucks. You know, I get it, but you know, a lot of people like to point out the fact that Bradley Beal gets paid a lot of money, which that is something that he earned. You know, he played great in Washington. Washington rewarded him. You know, can't fault him for that. That was the front office choice to pay him that much, and at that time, Bradley Beal was kind of deserving of that money. But the no trade clause, it is frustrating, and at the end of the day, that all falls on the Suns front office for making that deal. You know, looking back at it now, maybe the Suns shouldn't have made that trade. I'm not saying that's the trade that put us in the position we are now, because I think the trade after that, which that's going to be another separate video at some point, I think that's what kind of put us in the position we are now, you know, trading away Ayton and Kamara. But that's another video. That's another topic. But you're lying to yourself if you didn't think and you weren't excited to see Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant come out here and play. You know, everybody was hyped, bro. My whole Twitter timeline was like, dude, how are you gonna be able to guard these three? How? And you know the iconic book video of him saying, I don't know how teams are gonna be able to guard us. Well, they found out a way. They did. And made of that, I mean, a lot of the problem is the Suns don't have a true point guard. And another problem is the fact that you can't share the ball with three people. It's impossible. We saw it. I think the Nets, it didn't work out too bad when KD was there with Kyrie and James Harden. But, of course, the injuries, you know, played a factor. But it looks like they found a good rhythm and flow of how to make that work. And maybe the Suns could have did that as well if everybody was healthy and people weren't in and out of the lineup. And that's another problem with the Suns too. But this is a Bradley Beal video. But just trying to find consistency with this team. You know, a lot of teams already have their rotation and their guys figured out like a couple weeks, like that. After the deadline, you know, by March they already have their identity and their rotations figured out. Suns don't have that. We have a different starting lineup every game. We have a different bench rotation every game. There's just no consistency with this team. It was the same thing last year. But obviously last year's team, I think, was a little bit better with that. Frank Vogel did a good job. He was obviously, I think, scapegoated. But yeah, I don't know. It's just tough. And then when you look back at the money deal with Bradley Beal, he's making more money than Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Anthony Edwards. Not Anthony Davis, Anthony Edwards. And then Donovan Mitchell. So it gets frustrating when you start looking at the contracts and the, you know, how much money he really does take up and chews up for the Suns, and then you're looking at the output that you're getting. But I mean, 17 points per game for a third option playing behind Kevin Durant and Devin Booker really isn't bad at all. But it just hasn't worked. You know, a lot of these guys, Beal and Book, are pretty much the same player in a sense. You know, and all three of those guys are mid-range players. And they, you know, a lot of their hot spots and go-to spots are in the same spots on the court. So trying to get to those spots it's kind of difficult because, you know, they're all roaming the same spaces, and then you don't have a point guard that can, you know, we don't have a floor general, and that's why I think Chris Paul is heavily missed. Tyus Jones obviously hasn't been anything short of a free agent signing of the summer. I don't know. It's just been tough. I probably just said a whole lot of nothing in this video, but I feel like there's a lot of key points that I made in terms of Beal's production. And obviously the frustration with the contract, I get that. Brad probably will be gone this offseason. I know he has his no trade clause, so that might be difficult. And I mean, these recent games as well, I guess I'll get into that. You know, Devin Booker has been out there fending for himself like it's 2018 all over again. He's the main guy, igniting the offense. I mean, we saw what happened in that Knicks game. You know, Book literally had more points than the rest of the team at pretty much throughout the whole game. He finished with 40, and then Bradley Beal didn't really get it going until like later in the fourth quarter, which was kind of tough because Suns were within like 10 or 12 points the whole game, just trying to fight back into it. You know, Devin Booker didn't have a running mate. You know, he had nobody else to come in here and provide anything. He was just out there fighting by himself. He was doing everything. And when you need to win these key games like this later in the season just to get into the plan, you need somebody else to step up. And I know this is Brad's second game coming back from injury, and the first game that he came back from in Boston, you know, he had 1 point on 0 field goals made. He was 0 for 7. And yeah, I don't know, it's tough. And then Brad missed 2 key free throws at the end of the game yesterday. But just from watching him on the court, it looks like he's just kind of floating around out there. It doesn't really look like he's playing with a purpose, I guess. And I don't really like saying stuff like that because I don't like to discredit these guys because, you know, they put a lot of work into their craft and in their game. And they got me, you know, I'm not anywhere close to being on an NBA court, so I feel like it's unfair for me to kind of judge them based on that. But I don't know. I think within reason I did a pretty good job talking about this. So yeah, I think I'll wrap up the video here. So if you guys did enjoy this little TED Talk about Bradley Beal and his tenure with the Phoenix Suns, please make sure to drop a like. And if you aren't subscribed, you might as well, because I'm posting great videos here on the channel for you guys to enjoy. And so you guys are up to date with new videos, hit that post notification bell right down below so you guys are updated with all the new videos coming on the channel. Without further ado, thank you guys for watching. See you guys in the next one. Peace.
Is your barber black?
My barber is black, yes.
Very important details.
He is. I
Come
feel
on.
like I'm getting racially profiled on the
Nah,
playback right
nah.
now.
Do you?